Welcome to another episode of the House of KathNiel. It's been a while since the last one, but I think it's time to revisit the filmography of one of the biggest Filipino love teams of all time. Right now, I am tackling two of their most famous flicks, She's Dating a Gangster, released in 2014, and The House of Us, released in 2018, both directed by the super famous and ever infamous direct Cathy Garcia-Molina. As a side note, just because I'm talking about these two movies now doesn't mean that I won't be talking about them in the future. In fact, I will be revisiting one in the future because it's absolutely insane.
Gangster!
Now, on to the video. Released in 2014, She's Dating a Gangster is the official second movie of KathNiel and the first movie of theirs directed by Cathy Garcia-Molina. Based on a pop fiction book of the same name published by CandyMagazine.com's Teen Talk section, She's Dating a Gangster follows two stories, that of Athena and Kenji in the 1990s and of Kenneth and Kelai in the early 2010s. Both couples are played by KathNiel. The movie was distributed by Star Cinema, ABS-CBN's Film Production Incorporation, and grossed approximately $5 million. Back in the 90s, bad boy Kenji de los Reyes was dealing with a broken heart. At the same time, the new girl he pissed off, Athena Dizon, played a harmless trick to get on his nerves. Little did she know that that trick would lead to Kenji asking her to join him in his convoluted quest to get his ex back. Though hesitant at first, Athena inevitably agreed. After a couple of mishaps and bullying, some of it from Kenji, Athena starts to develop real feelings for him, and he starts falling for her as well. The two fall in love and start a real relationship. All seem to be going well until Kenji's ex calls the both of them to the hospital to explain the real situation. She broke up with Kenji because of a serious heart condition, believing that it would be better for the both of them. But now she needs Kenji back in her life in order to survive. Hearing this, Athena and Kenji have a tearful farewell, and Kenji ends up marrying his ex-girlfriend. Years later, it's Kenji's son Kenneth who helps reunite Kenji and Athena for a brief moment with the help of Kelai, Athena's niece. Athena spends the last moments in Kenji's arms before dying because she too had a serious heart condition. In the end, Kenneth and Kelai end up together with the help of Kenji. The House of Us, Cathy Garcia-Molina's second collaboration with KathNiel, was released in 2018, 4 years after She's Dating a Gangster. It was highly successful, breaking many records including being the first locally produced movie to reach 600 million pesos in domestic box office earnings. At the same time, this is KathNiel's most critically acclaimed film, where the two were finally acknowledged as phenomenal box office stars and were given the Golden Jury Award and honors at the 50th Guillermo Box Office Entertainment Awards. On her own, Catherine Bernardo won the Best Actress Award at the 35th PMPC Star Awards for Movies. The House of Us begins with a breakup between longtime couple Primo and George. The two of them met in college and dreamt of growing old together. However, real life started getting in the way of their plans. After George's grandma passed and left Primo and George her old ancestral home, the two had to work hard in their young age to make ends meet. Sadly, Primo's music career struggled to take off, and George was too preoccupied with working in med school. Their relationship fell apart and the two were no longer in contact for some time. Fast forward to a couple of years later, George is just about to finish med school. On the other hand, Primo, who was MIA, returns to their home. The two fight because George plans on selling the home in order to bring her and her brother to the Netherlands to find their absent father. Primo refuses, claiming that his name is also on the house deed. Instead, he tries to win back George's affections and is almost successful until she breaks down. After rehashing their past, Primo does everything in his power to pay for her and her brother's tickets to the Netherlands. After selling his record collection and finding a buyer for their home, Primo, George, and George's brother fly to the Netherlands. George and her brother end up learning more about their father's past. And as this is happening, Primo and George make peace with their relationship. They return home and prepare to sell the house. As they were tidying everything up, George finds a letter from Primo from the past. Realizing that they should have stayed together no matter what, the two reconcile and try to give their relationship a second try. I think before I go into the meat of the video essay, I should express my opinion on these two movies, just so you guys know and see my bias and where I'm coming from. If you want to skip to the more theoretical or serious part of the essay, move to the timestamp on screen. These two movies are possibly my two favorite KathNiel movies of all time, for very, very different reasons. She's Dating a Gangster is a problematic fave. I watched it when I was really young and found it incredibly corny yet kilig. I rewatched it again during quarantine and realized that it perpetuates a lot of misogynistic and sexist norms. In particular, that scene where Kenji threatens Athena with suicide if she doesn't go along with his scheme was incredibly difficult to watch, especially in a post-#MeToo 2021. Still, I have enough nostalgia for this rom-com to be able to still put it on and hate watch it every 6 months or so. That's not to say that it's a completely horrible movie. This movie is a testimony of KathNiel's timeless chemistry with iconic scenes that will go down in Filipino movie history because of its insane cuteness. The House of Us is something I just discovered earlier this year. I had to do a podcast with a couple of friends where we discussed it, link in the description by the way, and I found myself pleasantly surprised. Not only did the performance of Catherine and Danielle drastically improve from She's Dating the Gangster, but so did the production value, Molina's direction, and the overall story. Personally, I find the emotional growth and story arc of Primo and George far more satisfying than that of Kenji and Athena. That happy ending of Primo and George felt earned, as if the two deserved to get back together because of their history and the effort they put into being a couple. Despite being very different, there are many similarities between these two Molina-directed KathNiel movies. After all, they were directed by the same person for the same people and made by the same network for the same audience. There are bound to be some thematic and technical overlaps here and there. Now here's a big question. Auteur theory? Question mark, question mark, question mark, exclamation point? Maybe. The idea of the auteur theory started after the boom of French cinema in Europe during World War II. French director French director Truffaut wrote the essay entitled La Politique des Auteurs, attacking a lot of contemporary French directors for being nothing more than stage setters, only good for making pretty pictures that weren't in any way, shape, or form meaningful. Truffaut said that they had no personal style to their work and were nothing compared to the likes of Renoir, Wells, and Hitchcock. Andrew Sarris, an American film critic, then built on that idea and coined the term auteur theory in his essay Notes in the Auteur Theory in 1962. It was here that he determined the 3 things a director must have to be an auteur. Number 1, technical competence. Number 2, a distinguishable personality. And number 3, an interior meaning or definitive worldview. Remember those, that's a big part of my essay. In short, an auteur is a director who is great with craft and technique, who has a unique style to them, and whose belief system is evident in their piece of work. Now with all this in mind, this begs the question, is Cathy Garcia-Molina an auteur? Cathy Garcia-Molina has directed many movies in her lifetime. I haven't watched all of her films, and I won't be doing that for this video essay, but I did watch a lot of them. But regardless of that, I personally feel that it is impossible to determine whether Cathy Garcia-Molina is an auteur conclusively because of the existence of the Philippine studio system. You see, there is a Marxist influence in some of the earlier works discussing the auteur theory. When a director is forced to work in a system that prioritizes the market over the individual brilliance of one person, can you really consider them a unique auteur? This theory was partly born out of contempt for the American Hollywood studio system, which, if you've seen my first video, clearly influenced our own studio system because of the big C, colonialism. Now, I don't want to come off as someone who doesn't enjoy a good studio system movie. After all, I am dedicating this whole video essay series to KathNiel, studio system darlings. But I will admit that the stories that are funded and backed by Star Cinema and other studios have their limitations. For these studios, the goal is mainly to churn out movies that are meant to be commercial successes, which is why the staff members have to adhere to certain tried and tested tropes and guidelines that they believe appeal to the masses. These movies don't gun for prestigious awards or critical admiration most of the time. They play safe to earn that cash money. And when you're restricted in that way, movies produced under one studio tend to feel formulaic and repetitive, even if different directors and scriptwriters worked on it. So while one could argue that there are elements in CGM's films that show her distinguishable personality or worldview, you could also say that those aren't signs of CGM and are instead signs of star cinema. But you know what? I will try to make the case for CGM because I like her enough to do it. And because barring the blatant commercialism of Star that makes CGM's claim to certain authorship kinda difficult, you can actually see her competency in film in The House of Us and She's Dating the Gangster. Let's break it down one by one. One thing is for sure, while CGM upped the quality of her cinematography in her most recent works, she's been technically competent from her humble beginnings. One of the things CGM constantly says is that she directs for the mass audience. Her priority is that her films have to be easily understood. This shows in the practicality of her cinematography. Though she has tried more experimental shots in The House of Us, majority of the film follows the same basic film rules She's Dating the Gangster does. Slow motion during kilig scenes, close-ups during emotional confrontations, using color grading and costume design to signify the passing of time. These techniques come together to tell two coherent movies. However, I think one of the most distinct CGM signatures that I've noticed in both films are the invisible and at times visible boundaries between two opposing characters. CGM likes to put Catherine and Danielle on opposite sides of the screen when they don't see eye to eye. These boundaries eventually disappear gradually over the film when the two get closer. I've seen this in other movies of hers too, like Four Sisters and a Wedding. Though not artsy-fartsy like other auteurs, CGM definitely champions practical filmmaking over anything else. And that's an art form that needs to be mastered in itself. The second requirement of an auteur is that they must have a distinguishable personality in their body of work. Their creative vision and voice should go beyond basic technical competency. They must have an unmistakable style. This is probably the strongest case one can make for CGM's authorship. Whether it's in her comedy or drama scenes, all CGM films have distinct dialogue and direction. Though some may argue that CGM sticks to the basics in her cinematography, there's no denying that her main strength as a director is in drawing out the emotions and actions that she needs from her actors. For example, in both The House of Us and in She's Dating the Gangster, CGM is able to bring out the, well, for lack of a better term, most in Catherine Bernardo, especially in these two emotional climaxes.
I love you too. Thank you for the 2 months, 2 weeks, 3 days, 10 hours, 57 minutes ng pagmamahal. Nababaunin ko buong buhay ko. Halos 7 taon ang buhay ko. Binigay ko sa'yo, primo. At sa 7 taon na yun, isang beses lang ako nagsabing pagod na ako. Isang beses lang ako nagtanong kung kaya ko pa ba. Isang beses lang ako nagkaroon ng lakas ng loob para sabihin kung ano talaga yung nararamdaman ko. Nang nasasaktan na ako. Nang nauubos na ako.
This is usually how it is in the CGM-directed confrontation scene. The fight between the main characters devolve into a long, emotional monologue from the damaged or wronged protagonist, where all of the emotional baggage spills out. The other person, the one with arguably less to lose, sits and watches. This happens in almost all of her films, regardless of whether the confrontation is between two lovers, two exes, or various family members. And while these scenes are filmed, cut, and edited in a very simple way, the creative voice and pulse of CGM is hard to miss. I am not going to lie, this was probably the hardest one to pin down, mostly because I believe that the interior worldview of Cathy Garcia-Molina can be boiled down to hope and happiness, which would be the interior worldview of star cinema and of the romance genre in general. I'm not saying that that's invalid, it just goes back to the Marxist criticism of the auteur theory. Can someone working within the system create their own personal content without being influenced by the market and the network? Regardless, CGM is known for her happy and hopeful endings.
Love stories, especially my movies, it will always end well. It will always end on a good note, on a positive note. But at least you won't know how I would get there.
Romantic and familial conflicts are ultimately resolved with the power of forgiveness and unconditional love. In She's Dating the Gangster, Kenji and Kenneth end up reconciling after years of not seeing eye to eye because Kenneth realizes that despite not being the perfect father, Kenji deserves to be forgiven because of all the sacrifices he made for him and his mother. This leads to Kenneth setting up Kenji and Athena so that they can finally reconcile before her demise and the implied start of a healthier and happier father-son relationship. Whereas in The House of Us, George finally forgives Primo after seeing all the changes he made to become a better man, and she apologizes for not being there for him during his hardest moments. The two then swear to stay together no matter what, facing whatever future challenges that'll come as a loving couple instead of letting it drive the two of them apart. And I just want to point out that despite me only primarily using the two KathNiel movies as examples, this is a recurring theme in most CGM films like Seven Sundays, Four Sisters and a Wedding, My Ex and Wives, My Amnesia Girl, and so on and so forth. Though one can argue that the happily ever after in love trope is a genre ideal and not an exclusive CGM thing, I still do believe that there is sincerity in these values because despite being exhausted in the Philippine system, Kilig, Hugot, and family are clearly part of CGM's personal worldview, and she cannot make a movie without one or all of it in it. That's her thing. So what's my verdict? Okay, after all this, after I said that Cathy Garcia-Molina does satisfy the three requirements of Saris, do I consider her an auteur? I will say that technically yes, if he were to stick to Saris' model, but I wouldn't want to call her that mostly because I'm not entirely sold on the theory of an auteur. It just seems hard for me to judge a movie based solely on auteurship. But I don't believe in the death of the author either because it's always interesting and relevant to study a director's body of work, especially when said director is a very big and influential personality, such as Cathy Garcia-Molina. Whatever the case, whether or not you agree with the auteur theory wholeheartedly or you stay on the fence just as I have, I think it's important to have conversations like this surrounding Filipino directors and filmmakers because they deserve to be taken seriously. I laid out the argument for CGM using the KathNiel films, and you can make your own judgment. There is one thing that I want you to take away from this though. Despite her reputation in the media industry being not as sanitary as it could be,
Na-offend ako. My actors don't do this to me. To think sikat na sila. Kayo, wala pa nga kayo napapatunayan. I wanna go out.
I believe Cathy Garcia-Molina deserves to have her body of work analyzed and picked apart because she has done a lot for Philippine cinema. And for me, the fact that she made an influence matters more than her claim to authorship. Hi guys! Thanks so much for watching this new video of KathNiel, and thank you to all those who donated to my COVID-19 bills. The names of the coffee donators are down below, and thank you so much to those who donated via GCash and directly to my bank account. It is much appreciated. If you liked what you watched, be sure to give a like and subscribe and comment down below what you think of KathNiel and what you think of these movies. Hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you all next time. Bye!